In this module, we will be talking about tonal value, another element of art. Tonal value refers to the lightness or darkness of any color. It doesn't matter if you're working with tones of gray alone, or a limited and even a rich color range. With tonal transitions, it's still tonal value. Regardless of whether it's a monochromatic or full color palette, it can be a powerful tool in the artist's toolbox. Grisaille or brunaise are artworks that use a monochromatic palette. They can be sketches for larger compositions, or an underpainting, in which case initial layers are painted very thin. They can also be copies of finished paintings, models for prints, or even the final artwork. Here's a good example in this Grisaille by Jan van Eyck titled The Annunciation Diptych, circa 1433. A diptych is an artwork comprised by two related and often physical attached paintings. Tone or tonal value is usually employed to give an illusion of depth and volume to shapes. The previous image was a good example of this, as is this painting by Andrea Mantegna titled Samson and Delilah, a painting created around 1500. Another thing worth noticing in this painting is that although there is volume, there's not much depth. The reason why is Mantegna wanted to emulate a low relief, which is when figures project only slightly from the background. Eyck's Annunciation Diptych, on the other hand, emulates a sculptural group with full volume and depth. The Grisaille technique is appropriate in both artworks because it recreates the illusion of stone. Here's a Grisaille by Anthony van Dyck titled Rest on the Flight into Egypt, 1627. This monochrome oil is based in the artist's previous painting, The Virgin and Child, painted between 1615 and 1625. While grisailles are usually preparatory sketches for larger paintings, this one specifically is just a copy or ricordi of a finished painting. On top of that, it may have been used as a model for subsequent engravings. Donato Credi's nude academic sketch of a man holding a staff, 1617-49, is a great example of a brunelle. A brunaille is a painting or drawing done with a monochromatic palette too, much like grisailles, only with tones of brown color. As the title specifies, this painting is in all likelihood not a finished artwork, but rather an exploration on tones for another painting. Le Grand Odalisque is a famous painting from 1814 by French painter Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres. The Odalisque in Grisaille, however, is probably less known to the public. It was created around 1824 to 34, and it is a byproduct of the bigger Le Grand Odalisque. The Odalisque in Grisaille has a reduced palette, and it is also much simplified, with less detail if compared with the original painting. It was possibly created to be used by engravers for the purpose of creating black and white prints, or as an underpainting for an incomplete offshoot. In the realistic tradition, artists often use small dots to create a pattern simulating various degrees of value. As a technique, this way of drawing is called stippling and involves covering an area with dots. Here's an engraving by Giulio Campagnola titled Young Shepherd Seated in a Landscape, circa 1509 to 1512. Giulio Campagnola invented stippling in the early 16th century. Notice how Campagnola combines hatching with stippling here in this artwork, very efficiently adding volume and depth. Here's another example of stippling from Giulio Campagnola, this time around titled Venus Reclining in a Landscape. In this engraving created between 1508 and 1509, Campagnola uses exclusively stippling to create shapes, volume, and depth. There's nothing else here, no hatching, no cross-hatching, there's not even contour line. Compared with hatching and cross-hatching, stippling allows for a greater range of tone and subtler gradations. Pointillism is a similar technique in which small dashes of pure color are applied repeatedly to form an image, but the palette is usually full color instead. Black and white photography is usually rich in tonal value. A photograph can be said to exhibit a wide tonal range, in which case it will look balanced. This artwork by Sebastião Salgado, titled Landscape of an Igapó with Jawari Palm Trees, is a good demonstration of a photograph with a wide tonal range. For the most part of his career as a photographer, Sebastião Salgado has mostly focused on labor and social conditions, but he has also photographed nature. A photograph can exhibit a narrow tonal range too. such as in this photograph by Henri Cartier-Bresson. The interplay between white walls and shadows in this image is also a masterful exemplification of composition. Cartier-Bresson pioneered street photography. Another famous artist that took on the subgenre of street photography was Garry Winogrand. This photograph by Edward Weston has everything from mid-tones to light gray highlights and pitch-black shadows. Nothing is too extreme in this image, nothing too harsh or contrasting. Shapes and tones are soft, and even highlights are light grays instead of undiluted white. Edward Weston worked a wide range of subjects, from landscapes to still life, nudes, and portraits. The lightest value usually creates a focal point of interest. A highlight will attract the eye, even more so if the light element is cast against a dark element. No better example of this than Edward Weston's Pepper No. 30, a photograph taken in 1930. Notice how everything is dim and dark other than the young woman's face, her outrageous laughter made even more conspicuous by the blurred hand. It is also a good demonstration of street photography's strength, the immediacy of an intimate encounter with the subject. A photograph can exhibit a narrow tonal range, such as in this photograph titled Migrant Mother, Nipomo, California, 1936, by Dorothea Lange. Lange became famous for her Depression-era photography. This photograph has low contrast as it uses exclusively mid-tones, dark and light grays, but no white nor pitch black to speak of. Robert Capa, to whom we owe the war photography genre, along with Gerda Taro, is the author of this famous photograph. It depicts the American troops landing on Omaha Beach in 1944 on D-Day in Normandy, France. The kinetic nature of war forces the photographer to use a high-speed film, which is the reason why this picture looks grainy. It has a narrow tonal range too, mostly black and dark grays, but not that many. Robert Mapplethorpe became famous for his portraits of famous people, nudes, and still-life photography. Here's an example of his work, a photograph titled Flower Arrangement, 1986. This photograph could be said to have a relatively wide tonal range, from pitch black to white and some mid-grays in between. That doesn't stop Mapplethorpe from overlapping the farthest tones in the tonal scale, thus taking advantage of the ensuing contrast.